Thanks, Sarah. Firstly, apologies, sore voice from being a long-suffering Westmeath GAA fan, so apologies for that. I'm going to keep it very brief. Quick overview of BRE, why we're in Ireland, what we are doing from a testing and certification perspective in Offsite, which is very important in the UK, what innovation we're doing with different companies, and also what's best practice, what's actually happening in the UK market. One thing Ian mentioned there as well is about scale of production, and make no pretense, like modular is not the full solution to meet the housing crisis, but it's part of the solution. And if people go off in different directions, my view is it won't work. I think that's why the collaboration is really important. And I think the other part as well, and I think my colleague David Gall said at CitA event last year, is education and awareness about modular. There is that perception out there. And unfortunately, the likes of IKEA coming into the market in the UK kind of reinforces this flat pack mentality as well, which really isn't true. Just to kind of give you an idea, this is our main campus in North Watford. So BRE is in existence since 1921 and was a government test laboratory. So we are basically a multidisciplinary organisation involved in the built environment. So that's everything from education and training to development standards to testing and certification, what goes into buildings. And the buildings could be a residential build or a data centre. And I suppose what we believe in, and this to me is really, really important to the core of what we do, we are looking for better and safer ways for people to live and work in. From a health and well-being perspective, obviously fire safety is critical. And one other thing that gets lost in it as well is obviously what's affordable and also what's comfort factor. So we can go on about all modern methods of construction, but also the comfort aspects in a building as well, whether you're living and working, is really important. So as I mentioned, we were a government test laboratory up until 1997, then became privatised. So at the very top is this BRE Trust. So it's actually a UK registered charity. All the subsidiaries in Ireland, the UK, China are commercial. All the profit goes back into the trust for investment in education, development of standards, testing and certification, and we also fund a lot of research programs through undergraduate and postgraduate colleges in the UK, Ireland and overseas. And I suppose from an expertise perspective, these are kind of the key areas we work in, and obviously a key area for us is fire safety. So a lot of people may be aware the day after Grenfell we were mandated by UK government and London Met Police to go and do fire investigation on high-rise. And one thing that gets lost in all of this is fire investigation of defective buildings and witness assessment visits. And unfortunately, there's still bad practice going out there. And that's not just construction in the boom period, it's pre-boom and post-boom period as well. And unfortunately, we come across a lot of that in the UK and Ireland, not just in residential, but also in commercial. Where we are in the world, we're in 80 countries. We've set up in Ireland, and the main reason we've set up in Ireland is because of Brexit. Because we do testing to CE marking, it meant that any UK testing house had to have a testing facility in an EU country. So since late 2017, we've been based in Ireland. But I suppose through all our collaboration with stakeholders, through academia, industry, regulators, these are all the challenges we face in industry, from production, manufacturing, from construction, and from the property sector. And one or two key areas here I would say is really important is the gap between design and operational performance in the building, and how do we address that. Cost obviously is a factor, as Ian alluded to, but also then having proper assessment methodology in buildings. What is safe to live in, and kind of given that, allaying any concerns that maybe regulators or local authorities may have, particularly with modern methods of construction, because everyone goes on about the housing crisis and rapid build, and we have to build as many houses as quickly as possible, and that is no different to the UK, but that's great, but how safe is that building? And is there proper methodology in terms of the factory production controls that goes into that as well? And I suppose, look, as I said to you, from an Irish perspective, we're actually building a fire test laboratory here. But one of the key areas here which I'll focus on today is offsite and also innovation. And that's really, really important. What works well, what doesn't work well. And if you have early engagement and stakeholder involvement from manufacturers, from industry, from regulators, it's successful. And we'll show exactly what we've done in the UK from a testing and certification perspective. So apologies, some of these slides were also presented last year. So one thing BRE do in the offsite sector is not only do we test and certify the buildings and material that goes into offsite construction, but we've now developed a standard called BPS 7014. Apologies, I didn't come up with the name. Sounds like C3PO or something from a science fiction movie. But to us, it's assessment methodology of what is best practice. And the idea behind it is, when we looked at this at the beginning, we said, why do we need a standard? Who do we need to get involved? How is it different to what's in the marketplace already? The certification process, but also the testing process as well. So what we did was we looked at why do we need it in the first place? And you know, in the UK, for example, they need to build nearly 900,000 homes by next year, and they're not going to meet that target. In the Ireland, obviously, the long-term target is 500,000 homes. And to put that in international context, in Brazil, the target is 25 million homes to be built long-term, and most of them to be socially affordable houses. So you can see the scale as you move up. And repeat again what I said, modern methods of construction and offsite is a part solution to this in our view. It won't obviously meet the whole, and I think one of the key things is scale of production. Ian mentioned as well, this kind of misperception of offsite and flat pack mentality. And when I show you our innovation park and what we do in the UK and internationally, what we're planning for Ireland, we have an innovation park with different types of build on it. And if you mention to somebody coming along that maybe has little knowledge around modular and say that's a modular, and I've seen this at first hand, the first thing they tend to do when they go in is jump up and down. Fact. And that's not just a person, that could be somebody from government or from a regulator's perspective as well. So, but when you go into a building and you say nothing to them, and they come in and say, God, that's a fantastic structure, we actually say, well, that's actually modular, that's offsite, that's volumetric construction. They're blown away. So again, it's perception at the end of the day. On the left, there is a high-rise modular. Look, let's be honest, it aesthetically looks horrible. On the right is traditional build, but actually the right is actually a modular build. So again, it's perception. What goes into the build, the methodology used as well. And that's what we face in the UK as we face in Ireland. So when we looked at developing the standard, we kind of wanted, we didn't want something to compete in the marketplace already. So for example, the boat pass scheme will explain how that's how it complements the boat pass scheme. So we wanted to work with different partners to improve methodology. Obviously from a compliance perspective, it's not only meeting the minimum building regulations, but goes way beyond building regulations as well. That's very important to us. Obviously creating confidence in the marketplace, not just among manufacturers, but also among regulators and local authorities, and also identifying comfort and well-being and proving that to the house builder or the homeowner, or for example, somebody working in an office. So they were really key important points when we were developing the standard. And when we decided to, at the beginning, BRE don't know the whole world, we're not experts in this area, so early engagement to us is critical. So that's where we engage with the likes of building control in the UK, regulators, and obviously from financial and insurance perspective, warranty providers in the insurance sector as well. So all of these organisations came together at BRE to develop the BPS standard. And what we developed out of them was a technical committee to kind of focus on 6 key areas. So from a structural perspective, from a fire perspective, acoustics. When I say acoustic, that also includes noise pollution inside and outside the building as well, health and well-being, sustainability, and quality management is really key as well. So this is a certification scheme. This is going into the manufacturer. How can they demonstrate that they're actually quality compliant from a factory production control perspective? And I suppose, why is it different to what's already out there? So, and just, sorry, I meant to say, this presentation is fully available, and it's also linked there to the full technical guidance if anybody wants to download the BPS standard as well. It's a 78-page document, so some nice evening leisure time to read that. But the key thing for us from a stakeholder perspective, we try to map out all of these key areas to develop into the standard. So from a regulatory perspective, a BIM perspective, which is obviously a core team of CitA as well, and going back to my point earlier on, to make sure minimal gap between design and operational performance as well, right through to resilience of the building, whether that's from a weather resilient perspective or fire resilient perspective, and obviously security as well, what goes into the build in terms of doors and windows. But all of these were brought together to develop the standard as well. So the standard itself, and this is from a UK perspective, but I'll explain in an Irish context in a few moments. Not only is it kind of meeting the 7 core requirements of the construction product regulations in the UK, we also have developed what's called an Industry Plus. We're actually saying, well, we don't believe that's good enough. It actually should go beyond that. So as part of the testing and certification process as a standard, we look at things like 3-dimensional testing of the build, racking, acoustic and fire testing. We also structural testing of the build, particularly for high rises. Ian mentioned earlier on the example in Croydon. Currently at the moment there's a student accommodation going up in Manchester, which actually will be the highest rise modular. We've been involved in that in terms of structural testing as well. And also I mentioned BIM tagging, tracking, making sure that everything is tagged and properly processed as well. And also, as I said at the beginning, is measuring the comfort aspects of the building as well. So that's kind of what we're doing, not just meeting, we're going way beyond the building regulations here. That's really, really important. And, also I mentioned the BIM tag and tracking. So what we've done within this, we've actually put in a BIM logging process. So every item and every material that goes in is properly BIM tagged and tracked. So again, there shouldn't be any clash detection on the project. There shouldn't be any conflict between designer and construction side of the build as well. And key thing as well is having one single source of truth. So there should be an online register of every manufacturer that goes through this process. So if a company in the world is looking to go out to tender, and for example, they can actually go to an online register and say that manufacturer is actually compliant to this standard, as an example. So that kind of single source of truth methodology. As I said, within BRE in the UK, we do large scale testing as well. So for high-rise buildings, we do a lot around dynamic load tests and structural testing of the building as well. So in an Irish context, just to put this in what we're planning. So the standard at the moment is specific to UK residential. The next stage is we're developing it for the likes of education, commercial and data centres in the UK. The third stage is we are looking to run it as a pilot scheme in Ireland for residential as well. So, and we don't believe there's a huge amount of work from our end to actually make that compliant to Irish building regulations, to Part B, Part L, Part M. But we need engagement from people on the ground here. We're not experts at building regulations, and that's why I'm throwing it out to here and to other organisations that if we can actually develop this as a standard and proof of methodology around modular, and give assurance to the government, because that's at the end of the day. We can talk all we want about modern methods of construction, rapid build, but unless something's not compliant or fire safety or health from a health and well-being perspective, you're not going to get buy-in from the regulators. So the certification process itself is threefold. We go in, it's like an ISO certification. It's a kind of 3-year process. So we go in and do an initial on-site audit, look at factory production controls, or if a company's ISO 9001 compliant, look at their testing processes, and then we go through the certification process. So we will go in and do the initial testing as the certification body, BRE. We'll go in and look at an assessment in the FPC, and then there's ongoing audit testing. So great, get your certification in year 1, but then next year we go and do an on-site visit to not just the manufacturing facility, but also where they've actually brought that from manufacturing plant into residential development, for example. And then that's ongoing for 3 years to go through a recertification process again. But more importantly as well, that goes on to a global online listing. So I'm going back to my earlier point that we would hope this would be a single source of truth for a modular or for any manufacturer or for any client looking to deal with a manufacturing company. Demonstrating compliance is really key, declaration of performance, but the key thing for us is continual assessment. This is just not a one-off certification, the continual assessment's built into it as well. I mentioned earlier on, we don't believe, and this is why we brought stakeholders together, so we wanted to make sure it wasn't competing. And I can only speak from a UK perspective. Obviously people are aware of the BOPAS scheme, which is very much an assessment scheme around durability, process of producing modular and online listing. So this to us is actually complements BOPAS, and in fact they're one of the key stakeholders in this. This goes beyond that in terms of certification, factory production controls, so we see it complementing what BOPAS is doing as well, and we see no reason why this couldn't be developed in harmonisation with potentially what's in the marketplace here already. I mentioned about innovation, and there's 2 ways to look at innovation. If you're sitting as a government, sometimes innovation is seen as risk. You know, that's good because you're a regulator, you want to make sure everything's compliant. But for us, innovation is what works well, what doesn't work well. That's the idea behind innovation. And go through best practice, and sometimes it's very successful, other times you have to go back to square one. So in BRE, we've done a lot of testing certification of building material products within the building. So about 15 years ago, we built an innovation park in Watford. This is a snapshot of part of the build. So basically we go through proof of concept of a building, design, material, technology goes into the building, types of heating systems being used. In Watford now, we have 25 different types of build on site, 5 modular, timber frame buildings, traditional precast concrete. Everyone has got different heating systems, battery storage, combined heating systems, heat pumps, but it's different performance of the build, and that's the idea behind innovation. And there's different partners in each of those projects as well. But the idea behind the innovation park is it's scalable. So we have 6 innovation parks now around the world, in China, North America, Chile, and 3 in the UK. But each innovation park is unique to each country's building regulations and challenges. That's really key. And it's a network. So this isn't just a physical hub. We also connect with academia partners, manufacturers, regulators to actually build best practice and design and concept. And that's what we're planning for Ireland. So at the moment, we're currently in negotiations with semi-state bodies here to develop 2 innovation parks in Ireland. And one of them is very closely linked to modern methods of construction. And this is why engagement and stakeholder involvement is really, really critical from the get-go on this. So that's currently in discussion. I'm happy to talk to anybody afterwards that wants to get a bit more information. So, as I said, we have about 4 or 5 modular builds in the Innovation Park in Watford. Deborah Smith from Tempa Housing is going to speak, and obviously we have a partnership with Tempa Housing, and they're currently a live project in Watford, and Deborah will spend a bit more time on that. But I just want to go maybe through 2 examples in a UK and European context, what we've been doing in Watford. So the first one is Project Utopia. I don't know if anybody's come across this. This is a weather and fire resilient home. And like Ian said, the purpose of this is to basically look at low cost compared to traditional build as well. Has a combined heating system, solar panels, but also smart connectivity is built into this building as well. And also this company is also developing this to this BPS standard. So it's one of the first modular companies actually to go through a kind of pilot scheme and a gap analysis to see where they are to the BPS standard. But what's really interesting about Utopia, they're not a construction or manufacturer, they're actually a digital company. The CEO is a chap by the name of Joseph Daniel. He's 27 years of old. He wouldn't mind me saying he's a bit of a maverick. He speaks his mind, which is great in some ways because he actually tells you what he thinks. So that's a digital company involved in this space as well. From a European context then, we work a lot with House in Switzerland. So if you've ever travelled continental Europe and you look at Offsite, typically they're 3 or 4 stories, volumetric construction, and a lot of them are battery storage. So House have a house on the Innovation Park in Watford as well. And again, that's volumetric. If I then go from innovation and maybe give you 2 quick examples of what's actually happening in the UK at the moment. So at the moment, Home Group in the UK have developed an innovation village in Gateshead. And what's really interesting about this project, it's made up of 45 different types of build, but it's a mixture of modular and traditional build. So they're going through on-site, and we're one of the partners in that in terms of the BPS standard, is actually what works well, what doesn't work well. Duplex apartments, detached, semi-detached, high-rise. So that's currently a live project. I think at the moment they've got 10 or 11 of the builds built. It's 45 buildings in total that they're planning to build. But also how they help build a community and how they integrate smart technology is really important in this as well. And then if you look in practice in the UK, we've gone about scale of production. So very recently, just at the beginning of February, Cambridgeshire Council approved the 2nd stage development of a village called Inholm in Cambridgeshire. And that's basically a village that's going to be consisting of 10,000 modular homes. As volumetric construction, and Ian mentioned Urban Splash are one of the key partners in that, along with Homes England. So again, demonstrating engagement and stakeholder involvement at the early stage to go through proof of concept and what works well. And that's it. Thank you.